Everyone to the MyoBrain YouTube channel. This will be a recap of my experience in my first ever Hyrox, which was Dallas in November of 2024. This will be a little bit of a random video, just sort of my collection of thoughts, my experience with the race. It's not going to be a tips and tricks type video. I'm almost 10 years, I think maybe longer than 10 years into like competing in these types of activities. I did my first natural bodybuilding show in 2012, and I guess I did a Hyrox in 2024. So that's on and off of competing in bodybuilding, powerlifting, CrossFit, and now Hyrox in some capacity in those activities. So I have a lot of experience with those different modalities. Our clients have experienced those different modalities, and it's always just a fun, I think, recap to compare the environments and some of those things and the pros and cons of the training styles and all of that stuff. So I really have 5 main takeaways from my Hyrox race. The first one is training with an end goal that has a definitive date on the calendar is a game changer for your attention to detail. When you put that entry fee in, when you pay your $100, whatever it is, there is something about your excitement for training. There's something about your attention to detail with your eating, with your sleeping, with watching YouTube videos about how to improve small things that, at least for me, just makes the whole process more enjoyable and more meaningful. The reason why I think this is critical to touch upon, if you're someone who's in a little bit of a rut, that doesn't mean you're not even working out. That kind of means you're going to the gym, you're just kind of doing stuff. It doesn't really get that exciting about it. You miss a couple of workouts because, like, what am I really doing this for? When you sign up for a thing, again, it can be really important to you, moderately important to you, whatever. It really does light a fire underneath you. And I've seen that with every sport that I've done, right? So at this point in my career, where I don't really have ambitions of being elite in anything, sometimes my thought process is, what's the point of paying this money and traveling to this thing when really it's like not going to be my everything. That's kind of like my default reaction to it. I should go all in if I'm going to do it. But then I realized, well, the point is, like, it makes my whole experience better. It makes just a random workout in April more fun for me when I know why I'm doing it, right? And I wouldn't say so much you have to have even a competition as an end goal. For example, I got married and then went on a honeymoon in May of 2024. And I used that as like a big thing for me to get in shape and to train hard and have a great physique. Again, don't get in the mental status of, well, it's not really that important, right? Like, don't diminish it. Don't diminish the thing, right? It can be a wedding. It can be a 10-year reunion. I don't really care. But the takeaway, the number one takeaway here is having that definitive thing on the calendar makes your consistency easier. It makes it more meaningful, and it makes it more fun, in my opinion. So the second takeaway, which is a bit more specific to Hyrox, is the joy I had of being a beginner in an activity. So the Hyrox race, if you're not familiar with it, it accumulates 8 kilometers of running. The total time I spent running was almost exactly 40 minutes. I started training for this in around April or May. And when I decided to kind of think about doing it was February. And this is not an exaggeration. I had not went on a jog since I stopped doing CrossFit in like 2020, somewhere around 2020. So we're talking about 4 years where I literally have not done anything besides a walk. I've done some cardio, I've done like some rowing and biking, but probably like once or twice a month, to be honest, on average over those 4 years. I really came into the Hyrox prep in a good way, this is my point, at like this, if this is my potential, I was down here. I had so much room for growth in the capacity of running and getting in good cardiovascular shape. I distinctly remember my first run in February. I ran like in our neighborhood, and my literal goal was just to run for like 5 minutes and see how it felt. I think I ran for like 4, and my calves were burning, my Achilles were burning. I ran like a 9-minute mile pace. And I walked home, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to do a Hyrox. This is silly. So like I said, I really didn't train for it until like probably April, May, because I would just like go like run a minute, walk a minute once or twice a week. I probably ran like 20 minutes a week or something, just to see if my body could tolerate it. I started to slowly ramp up kind of my volume. I would do some more specific running workouts where I'd maybe run 3 minutes and then walk for 1 minute. We're talking very, very basic stuff here, but that joy of being a beginner in that early phase, and really all the way up to the race, to be honest, is I had so much room for growth. Not to sound like weird, but when it comes to like back squatting and bench pressing, things I like to do, I've back squatted 495. I've bench pressed with a pause 292. It takes a lot at my body weight to go squat 510, to go pause bench press 315. It would take a lot of my time, a lot of my energy. I'm really close to my genetic potential on the strength aspect, right? Cardiovascularly, especially when I started this prep for Hyrox, not so ever. So to give you an example, I would do a workout once I kind of got into the thick of things, of like a 1K run, rest a couple of minutes and do that for like 5 to 8 rounds. So it sort of mimicked the Hyrox race, if you will. One of the first times I did 8 sets of a 1K run, and I think I rested 3 minutes in between each of those. I was running like essentially a 9-minute mile during the run periods. And that was like my first real workout, right? At that point I felt in decent shape. I wasn't like in that much pain running. I think that was around that like April-ish time frame. I was like, okay, this is where I'm gonna start off at. And I would just do that running workout, similar running workouts at the gym. I would do sort of Hyrox circuits on a treadmill, slowly ramped it up. And then one of my final workouts before the Hyrox, I was running like a 420 kilometer, so think like a 7-minute mile pace. So I went from running like a 9-minute mile on a similar workout to a 7-minute mile, granted in like 6 months, and it wasn't just overnight, of course. It was like every week, every other week, I'd be able to run an 850 pace, an 840 pace, an 837 pace. And just every week I feel like I got better. And that was so exciting to feel like I can just go out there, work hard, recover, and it's a great chance I'm going to be a better version than myself last week, last month, etc. It reminded me a lot of my experience when I started to do CrossFit, and like you can't do any of the skills, like you can't handstand walk. I haven't ever snatched before, and that like acceleration of progress is so fun those first like 6 months. And of course that curve slows down. If I do want to improve at running, say in 2025, I'm not going to go probably from a 7-minute mile to a 5-minute mile in my workouts. But again, that joy of being a beginner was awesome. Also really fun is the like lack of pressure, if you will. I'm not sure if this makes sense, but I would feel some sense of, as I got closer to like impressive feats in powerlifting or CrossFit or whatever, there was some self-expectation of, well, this is what I have to do. Like I have to go squat, 485 at a meet, or I have to do 20 chest to bars unbroken, because I kind of knew what was possible, what the competition was doing. Versus in the Hyrox prep, I knew very well I was not going to be like in contention to win a race, so there wasn't a lot of pressure. I could kind of just go like hit a run workout, and whether I ran it at a 730 mile pace or a 715 mile pace was like kind of whatever. It didn't really make or break my day. The overall tension of the prep was so much lower. And that was very fun. Just the overall takeaway number 2 is the joy of being a beginner. All right, takeaway number 3 here. The energy and the popularity of the race was incredible. I had seen some races online and never been to one in person. It was different when I got in the building in Dallas. And there's like 5 people at this desk, and there's like a line here, and it kind of circles around. There was probably 200-300 people in line before me to get registered for this race. And I was like, oh, this is a big deal. I may have the number wrong, but I think Dallas had about 6,000 people across all the divisions, and it was a single day race. People were extremely positive. I couldn't believe how relatively organized things were when you consider the number of people who were in the building, in the arena, registered for the event, etc. I've been to powerlifting meets that have 60 people that are less organized than a Hyrox that had, 5,000. Same thing, I've been to CrossFit events that have maybe 100 or 200 competitors that have been less organized than this. Even though you are doing the race, which feels a little bit chaotic, because if I go at 8:20, there's people who have already started their race. There are people who are coming behind me. You don't really know who's on what lap. And it seems strange because you're trying to kind of compete against other people. But in the same vein, like, the test is the test, right? You know what the test is with the run, with the ski, with the run, with the sled, etc. So because you kind of have no idea where your competition is for the most part, you kind of can just stay in your own lane. So it feels like, yes, it's chaotic around you, but ultimately you're like in this small bubble where you're just like, run, hit this pace, get this breath, what's my heart rate? Okay, I feel good. Come in, ski erg. Okay, I know what I should ski erg. You're not worried about the person who's going out before you. For all you know, they're in a different division than you, right? So you're kind of just really to stay in your own lane as you go along things. So one of the things, and this video is not about like my performance there, but I like paced the event extremely well, especially for someone who's not a good runner. Like my ski paces, my row paces, like nothing besides actually the sleds, which are, you don't really pace them. It's more of just like a grunt work type thing. Didn't go to plan. I ran a little bit slower than I wanted to, and then the sleds were a little bit slower, but everything else was really close to like how I trained it. 500 people around you running and doing wall balls and burpees, but in a weird way, you feel like you're also alone. All right, my fourth takeaway here from Hyrox, I really enjoyed the test clarity and the standardization of the test. Number one, I really like that in the training aspect, because you could be a lot more precise about how you wanted to train it, of how, what I was good at, what I was not good at. You could experiment doing like Hyrox circuits, for example. One of the times I did like a simulation of the event in a gym. I was like running this certain clip, and I got to the back half, which includes the last two stations are run, you run a 1K, I think 80 meters or 100 meters of sandbag lunges, run another 1K and 100 wall balls. So, and again, to keep in mind, I'm not a good runner. So some people are like, yeah, the running is when I rest. The running was the hardest part of the race for me, right? So I'm doing running really hard on my legs, sandbag lunges. It's like 4 minutes of doing lunges continuously, hard on my legs, breathing is hard. Go back after that, run more, another 1K, come back, do 100 wall balls when you're really tired after an hour of doing the event, right? But because you know that ahead of time, I did a mock event, I think like in July, and I was like, holy crap, I almost had to walk on one of my runs. I think my run before the wall balls, I was blown up, was like a minute and a half slower than all my other runs. I was totally toast, did not pace it. The run, lunge, run, the run, lunge, run, I was not prepared for, okay? But because I knew the test, because it's standardized, I trained it. I would run slower. I would kind of work on those couple events. I could do intervals. I could just do a whole workout where I would run, do 30 lunges, run, do 30 wall balls, rest 2 minutes, do it again. I can really like own that part, right? So that test clarity, at least for me in training, makes it really fun just to be able to master the movements, master your technique, master your pacing, and to know what to expect, right? When you contrast that to CrossFit, which I'm not trying to like hate on the sport, but one thing that I never liked about the sport, even when I was gung-ho about it, was this idea that they, in my opinion, kind of hide behind, which is the unknown and unknowable. And if you've followed the sport whatsoever, you probably somewhat agree with this, unless you're just a fanboy, and then you're a fanboy and there's no talking to you about it. But it seemed like they used that slogan as another way to say like, we're really like disorganized and unprepared. That's more so what the sport was, right? When you think about the competition. Like the open workouts, what's really frustrating about them, you could do the open workout in 2017 and the movements are heavy snatches and bar muscle ups and double unders, just to give you some examples. And then similar to a Hyrox, maybe you do the open and you're like, man, I really struggle with the bar muscle ups and the heavy snatches, but I want to get better at the sport. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get better at those two things, right? A year comes around and you do the big dance again, you do the CrossFit Open, and then some guy on a whiteboard says, you know what? I don't want to do bar muscle ups. I want to do wall walks this year. And you're like, I've never done a wall walk. That'd be nice to know 2 months ago so I could work on this skill. My bar muscle ups went from I was doing singles and now I can do sets of 8, and you're telling me it's not even in the sport anymore? It's not even in the open, the thing I got so much better. I spent 30, 50, 100 hours working on my heavy snatches, and now we're doing clean and jerks this year. That was very frustrating, right? Now, I think some people, they like that to some extent. They like that variety. They get bored too easily, right? They like more of the chaotic nature. But again, in my opinion, you could have the bigger database of stuff, right? Hyrox has 9 movements you have to master and get good at. CrossFit can have 50 or 75 or whatever. That's cool. But I think it would bode well for the company to be like, you know, even let's say if the open is in March or something, say January 1st, say, hey, the open is in 8 weeks. These are the movements we're doing in the open. You don't have to give the workouts. You don't have to even get the weights. Just say, hey, we're doing burpee over bar. We're doing bar muscle up. We're using a rower, yada, 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 right? So then people can really train for your event. We have coached thousands of people on the exercise front or nutrition front who have gone through the CrossFit Open. And that is sometimes a frustrating thing to coach someone through, is that they can objectively be better at the activity. Again, their snatch could have gone up. Their bar muscle ups could have gone up. But they could have then objectively performed worse in the same competition, say the CrossFit Open, because the test changed, right? And maybe that's just a difference in the two sports that will forever be there, and maybe it's not that big of a deal, but it always just struck me as odd as someone that came from like a traditional sport background that no other sport does that, right? No other sport, like the NBA doesn't like wait until like the day before the season. It's like, you know what? We're gonna take away the 3-point line this year. No more 3-point line, and free throws are 5 points this year. You're like, oh, okay, like the teams would have been like, man, I should have cut this guy and signed that guy. That would have been good to know 2 months ago, right? Like every other sport really is like, has a set of rules, a set of expectations, and then the athletes, the coaches, the general managers build teams and skills around mastering that sport. That's how sports work, right? CrossFit really is the anomaly in which one year there can be a bike race and the next year there's not a bike race, right? That really is a bit more unique of the sport. And again, some people like that. I'm just saying I really enjoyed the more, the ability to dissect their race and training and to know what to expect. I don't think most people who do Hyrox like just do 9 movements throughout the week, for example. Like I would do an echo bike. I would do kettlebell swings. I would do push-ups. I would mix in a lot of movements, even in conditioning-based workouts that weren't in the Hyrox race. For example, I could make a workout where the purpose of this workout was to improve my sled push under fatigue. And that's specific to the sport because you know there's gonna be a sled push there and you're gonna be fatigued when you get there, right? But you also can do a workout in which, say, you do a 20-calorie bike, 10 burpees, push a sled down and back, rest a minute for 4 rounds, right? You can have the stimulus you want to improve in the sport, but then use some more novelty if you would like to actually improve that thing. All right, and my 5th and final takeaway is gonna be my only, I guess, advice for people who are wanting to do a Hyrox. I think it's quite simple. If you wanna do well at Hyrox, it's a running race. Yes, there are ski ergs. Yes, there are lunges, etc. But it is predominantly how fast you can run and how fast you can run when you're tired. I think it'd be very interesting to ask like the top 50 or 100 people in a division all what their like PR 5K or 10K time is or recent time and overlap that with their Hyrox time. And I'm sure it would be almost a one-to-one correlation, right? Like if you run a 23-minute 5K and someone runs a 19-minute 5K, it's almost impossible to beat them in a Hyrox. I don't care how good you are at wall balls compared to them, right? So if you want to do well, if you really want to prepare well for the race, you need to be running 2-3 plus times per week. It needs to take up a good chunk of your time. Now, maybe you don't care about maximizing. Like for me, I really only ran like twice a week by itself. I didn't really run that many miles. I probably ran once a week in a mixed workout. I think I ran like at the top of my peak volume, like 15 to 20K or like, 10 to 12 miles or something. But that was also because I have some injury history and stuff like that. So, but it is a running race, right? To give you some math behind that. So I did 75 minutes, which is a pretty good score. I think it's in top 10% or something in the men's open. Of the race, 45 minutes of the 75, I was either running on the track or running to and from an implement. 45 and a 75 is 60% of the time. So it has 9 movements, but one of those movements is 60% of the race. If you contrast that to something like the burpee broad jumps, which is a very challenging station, don't get me wrong, but that will likely take someone like 4 to 6 minutes. It took me closer to 4. That was about 5% of the overall race. And then you're done with it, right? You do 5% of the race as burpee broad jumps, you've graduated, and guess what? You're running more, right? So I'm not saying don't take the ski erg and the sleds and the wall balls seriously, but for example, if you're someone who like does CrossFit, you probably can just do your CrossFit classes like 3 days, 4 days a week, and then do like 1 or 2 additional runs, and you'll be ready for a Hyrox. I don't think you need to be doing like a 1 hour sled pull, ski erg, row, like very specific movements like that. Because if you have a base of a row or a base of a ski, going 11 seconds faster on that because you did a whole bunch of work isn't really going to matter until you get to the upper echelon, right? It's so much easier just to run every 1K 2 seconds faster to gain 15 seconds rather than doing 15 seconds harder on a ski erg, right? So I think people put way too much emphasis, if their goal really is to perform well, on the stations, and they really should put more of the emphasis on the running. And that's assuming you're not a great runner. Now, if you're a great runner and you're running like a 17, 18 minute like 5K or whatever, a really impressive 10K, then yeah, like you're really good at the running and you probably do need to work on the stations a bit more. So you have to know yourself, but ultimately keep that in mind. That is the secret. The secret sauce is if you get better at running, your Hyrox time will improve for, I would say, 95% of people. My big 5 takeaways, again, to recap here. Number 1, training with the end goal on the calendar is a game changer for my happiness and my focus. Number 2, I had a great bit of joy of kind of sucking at running and being a beginner and seeing that exponential kind of growth. Number 3, I was super impressed with the energy and the popularity of the actual event in Dallas. It was fantastic to see people there competing. Again, just a great vibe overall. Number 4, I loved the transparency and clarity of the test. I knew what was going to be there, unlike maybe the CrossFit Open. And number 5, if you want to get good at it, newsflash, it's a running race. You should be doing a lot of running. That's it, and thanks for watching.